feel. No, the reality is body, mind, and spirit. Everything has to work together. And so both have to make a move toward joining together. Unfortunately, they stay separate, like like quantum physics and general relativity. They don't want to come together, in some ways. But because everybody wants its own way, but no, we have to cross that divide. We have to merge. Merge is the right word, fuse them. There is no longer a boundary between science and spirituality. What science has that spirituality doesn't have much of is rationality. And the principles of experiments prove whatever theory you have. Because physics lives and dies on experiments. If you may have the most beautiful theory, but if the theory makes a prediction that doesn't happen, the theory has to be scrapped. So the experiment is more fundamental in science than the theory. In spirituality, it has to be the same. We have to reach similar states, and we have to be able to talk about it, and we have to be able to see that they are us. They're no longer objective like the outer reality, but they are subjective. But the subjectivity overlaps enough to be able to say, yeah, we're talking about the same thing. But it comes from experience, inner experience instead of outer experience. That's where the joining can come. And that's why spirituality has to be the right word, not religion, because there are 200 religions in the world. They better combine themselves first, right? They cannot even agree with themselves. How can we create science and religion? Right? Religion. I mean, you have to have 200 science and religions then, because all the religions are different. So, but there is only one physics in the world. So at least physics has already arrived to a level of unity because everybody agrees, because of the principles of physics are very clear. You have a theory makes prediction, and you make an experiment. If the experiment, says the theory is right, well, even if the theory says something that appears crazy, reality is that crazy. That's exactly what has happened in the last 100 years, because quantum physics makes predictions that nobody thought that could exist, that kind of reality. And now we know that there is a reality much more different than what we thought.
You've talked a lot, and your book includes so much about the differences between computers and humans, and the differences between biological systems and those that are, let's say, being utilized for artificial intelligence. And what you talk about is some of the beauty that every interaction that cells have is so much more than the sum of its parts. You talk about homeostasis, you talk about metabolic processes, and it's not enough to say, oh, cells are more than the sum of their parts. You're talking about, and again, you can think about this on a human level, it's not just the individuals that are more than the sum of their parts. It's the interactions, the processes that occur when these units interact is so much more than you could even imagine in the greatest fantasy. So can you talk about the cell being this microscopic, beautiful quantum classical system, but the human being this macroscopic one, and what that means practically for us?
Basically, if you look at the organization of the body, the organization of our body is, we have 30 to 50 trillion cells, and each cell, as I mentioned even earlier, is a part whole of the entire organism, because they all came out of a single cell, and each cell of these 30 plus trillion that we have has the same genome. So it has the same fundamental capacity to express as the original cell that created the entire organism. That's amazing. I mean, right now there are, in quantum biology and also in advanced biology, there are people that can reverse, a cell that is specialized can be made to be a stem cell, which is like a plenipotentiary cell that can create any other cell, revert in a sense, to become closer to the original cell that created the entire organism. Can you do that with a computer? Is a computer organized the same way? Not even close. Not even close. A computer is made of switches, on, off, on, off, on, off. That's it. At the best, the computer can know its own state, which is I'm open or I'm closed. That's it. There is nothing else for the computer. A cell has the potential to understand the other cells because they have the same making. You can explain the operation like a machine by, by deterministic things. But in living system, the cells make decisions which are, highly probabilistic. You can only predict probability because these cells are quantum and classical system. Each cell doesn't work with the principle of classical physics. They work with the principle of quantum physics primarily, and then certain processes are closer to classical and other are purely quantum. And we do not understand how a cell works as an informational system. That's why in my book I speak about live information, which is a different type of information between quantum information and classical information. That information will in the future be able to explain how living cells are informational systems, not biochemical systems. We have studied cells as if they were biochemistry. No, not even close. We can only explain a tiny bit, but cells are connected directly. All our cells are connected with the field that we are. So when the field that we are communicate with the body, it doesn't communicate with it, with a piece of the system. It communicates in parallel with the entire body. So the potentiality to self-healing, for example, by people that are developed spiritually, are enormous. But yet we have to start by changing the idea of what we are. If we think that we are the body, there is, the only intervention has to come from the outside. We are the field that we are can affect the body in ways that we have still to find out.
So, if we approach the cell and the biological systems as not just biochemical processes and those that obey the laws of classical physics,
as informational systems.
Right. If they are informational systems, this would be support for the notion that Bruce Lipton talks about, that the cell is operating as a microcosm of the entire organism.
We're talking about holographic systems where the part is like the whole.
So changing the environment of the cell, as it were, creating more positivity, whatever that looks like on a cellular level, is what has the potential, you're saying, to then heal the body in ways that, let's say, Western medicine may not be able to touch.
And right now we have to do it from the outside because we don't have developed enough of our own, our own soul, if you want to call it that way, but our own spiritual aspects.
So the next sort of evolution in medicine would be for all of us to have a better collective understanding of this sort of oneness and the deeper reality that consciousness and free will are providing, so that even medicine could be affected by the ways that we approach the cellular systems. It's fascinating.
That's right. And the way that you approach the cellular system is you start with love again, because, and the medicine that we practice today moves away from love because it's all about machines. We are repairing a machine, and that's it. And the doctor that looks at the computer doesn't even look at you, and he asks questions and he types on the computer.
This is why people are going to energy workers and healers, which some of them are legitimate and some of them are not. But the notion that there is a spiritual solution to what is going on that is presenting itself as a biological one.
And sometimes it works in ways that appear to be miracles, and they're not miracles because it shows that there is something that can come from the inside out, not only from the outside in. And besides, when I say outside in, is the in is a different one, because when I say from the outside in, there is nothing in other than organs, which is still outside. It is part of the outside in my meaning, because the inside is not in the body. The inside is the inner reality or meaning of qualia and meaning. That's not in the body, it's in a field that controls the body. Okay, so unfortunately, the words can deceive us.
We hear a lot from people who listen who are trying to understand this, right? They're trying to change their life. They may be suffering in this moment. What I'm hearing and what I believe to be true is that the first step to accessing a spiritual awakening, to accessing the ability to start to heal oneself through adjusting the field, is to start to change the mindset. First, to believe it is possible, and second, to start to understand the mechanism that we're actually changing something when we start to invoke love, when we start to meditate, when we start to have a belief that something is possible. We're not just wishful thinking, we're actually changing the frequency that is everything that surrounds us, which then impacts the cell.
In my experience, the first step is to take responsibility for what happens in your life. And that's the lesson that I learned by being CEO of a company, in fact, of more than one company, where the good and the bad that happens in the company, in one way or another, I had a lot to do by doing something, or even more, by not doing something when I should have done something. That is an idea that in the beginning was hard to grasp, because it is mostly by not doing what you should be doing that you attract to yourself suffering and whatever. Okay, for example, it was not taking care of myself, for example, my inner reality, that I became very estranged for myself and I was unhappy with my life. Okay, for example, it was not because I did something wrong, it's because I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And so it is very important to take that responsibility. And it was exactly because I had taken responsibility of my life that when I was suffering, I say, somehow I created that for myself. I didn't look outside somebody to blame for my state, but I say, what did I do? I want to know, what did I do to create this to myself? Who am I? Why is that? Why is that going? Why is that going on? With that sense of responsibility. This is my life. I am in charge of my life. That very important, because if you don't go there, you will always find outside the problems that affects you. They always come from the outside. That's why you go to the outside to find the cure. Once you know that what your happiness or not depends on you, from your interiority, from your conscious self to your inner experience, the meaning, the love that you have within for yourself and from others, that stuff, then you can find the solution. But if you don't, if you had to reach there first, otherwise you will always look at some kind of magic inside or outside to solve your problem, but it's not you.
We'd like to talk a little bit about your new book, which we just got a little taste of. And one of the quotes that I wanted you to talk about as you introduce us to what this next book is: we're not matter, we're not mind, we are spirit. That is meaning, love, joy, and peace. And if we want to have a better future, we must all radically change direction together. And to do this, we must first change our minds about who we are. I inverted those intentionally. Talk a little bit about what this means and what this new book is going to introduce us to that is not covered in Irreducible, which I can't imagine there's anything left because I love this so much. But tell us what we can expect.
Well, I mean, my next book is actually not in English yet. I mean, I had translated. It will be out in hopefully in 6 months or so.
Even people who speak English might think that this is not written in English. It's very dense.
That idea is an idea that will be my fourth book. It is an idea that the theory that I have can actually be explained very effectively with the concept of body, mind, and spirit, which I also illustrated earlier. Where you have essentially, you can, these three aspects are not separate. They're not separable. But so when we concentrate with one, we cannot lose sight that the other two are also present. When we tend to concentrate on one, we tend to separate the others, because the way we write and the way we think tends to work that way, because we focus on something. But in reality, body, mind, and spirit are three inseparable aspects which have overlaps. Like I mentioned before, I mentioned three overlaps plus the overlap in the center, which is all three together, which is the essence of one, essentially. That's the white light, the love, peace, joy, meaning, all that stuff. It's where we want to get to, within ourselves, in communicating and so on, to get to that meaning that unites, that brings us back to one. The next book is Beyond the Invisible, and Beyond the Invisible is actually a conversation, so it's easier to read and allows me to repeat things in different contexts without being accused of repeating myself. The context determines the meaning of, I mean, even particles, when, the property of the particles depend on the interaction that the particles has. So the reality is not built with things that are absolute. Everything is relative to each other.